Hello and welcome to PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm Blair Malloy. Today I'm joined by Serie A commentator Paul Visca as we look at the current resurgence of Scottish players taking Serie A by storm. Paul, it's fair to say that Scottish players are having quite a moment in Serie A right now.
Completely true, and probably it has surprised most people, the impact that they've made almost immediately from the south to the north. Clearly, the first one was Lewis Ferguson last season, and he seemed to pave the way. But then if you listen to Lewis Ferguson, he says, why did he choose to go to Bologna? Because he spoke to Aaron Hickey, and Aaron Hickey had a good season at Bologna. He said everything was wonderful there, and Lewis Ferguson said, okay, I'll take the leap. And then from then on, I think the Italian clubs appreciate the Scottish, what we say, work ethic, no nonsense. There's no frills about them. They do what the coach asks them to do, and they try and do it as best they can. Then you get Lewis Ferguson, who says Thiago Motta changed him as a player. Thiago Motta uses the midfield in a different way from most coaches, and he pushed Lewis Ferguson further forward. Lewis Ferguson he's now scored more goals than Dennis Law in Serie A. He became captain, and he was a leader. Was he a leader in Scotland? Was he even being noticed by the Scotland coach when he was performing so well in Bologna? When Thiago Motta was going to Juventus, and it was pretty clear at the end of last season that it was all going to happen. It was all going to go through. There's even talk that he was going to take Lewis Ferguson with him, and then obviously the cruciate ligament rupture ruined all that. But then when you see that Juventus signed Cop Miners from Atalanta, 50-60 million euro, whatever it was, that's Lewis Ferguson's role. That's what Lewis Ferguson could have been doing as well with Juve.
Whilst that move may have been put on hold, do you see that as just a matter of time before Lewis Ferguson picks up that big money move too, like you say, a Juventus, or even back to these shows and maybe to the Premier League?
It would be good. Because at Bologna this season is a completely different style of football. I actually had to commentate them, and I say I had to because it was quite difficult. There's just not the same movement anymore in midfield. And again, you'll hear Lewis Ferguson sing the praises of Thiago Motta, how he demanded so much of the players off the ball. And off the ball, Bologna this season, there's not much going on there at all with Vincenzo Italiano, who arrived from Fiorentina. If he gets a chance to come straight back into the team and he can inject something into their play, then once again he'll be on the radar for a January move, I imagine.
Ferguson then maybe walking back into a very different Bologna side that he left when he was out injured. Is that maybe a little bit of a concern that if he is able to recapture that form, like as you say, Thiago Motta was so pivotal in bringing out of him?
He must be concerned. Clearly, you can see how the team's not performing, and he knows his role. And will he come back in with the captain's armband? As he said, like the captain's armband for him doesn't mean that much, really. He just plays his game and he talks as he talks, no matter what. But you do get more. You're in the limelight as being captain, and if you're a captain who comes from Scotland, then is even like you really are standing out. And that's not to take away the influence that even, for example, Shea Adams had at Torino with his first match. He came on in the Coppa Italia match, and it probably was the hottest that Shea Adams ever played a football match in that temperature. It was mid-August. And he came on as a sub. Paulo Vanoli, even the Torino fans weren't too sure that Vanoli was going to do the job. And came on and he swung it across for Zapata to head in the goal that sealed the win. And from that moment on, Shea Adams never looked back.
As you've touched on there, Shea Adams, he's scored 4 goals in his first 9 games. I think he's always been a player that has maybe had this unlocked potential, and it seems that Paulo Vanoli, again a player who's no stranger to these shows with his time at Rangers, seems to really unlocked.
Completely agree. And he's going to get even more play. He's keeping out Tony Sanabria, who is a bit of a cult hero for the Torino fans. So that's already that's a big move by Vanoli to keep out Sanabria. Now that Zapata's injured and he's out for the rest of the season, Shea Adams now need to take over as the lead striker.
Time will only tell if he has indeed that character to take on that mould. Do you think he's benefiting from this maybe cult status that Scottish players are having in the league at the minute?
I think he's helping create that cult status because no one expected that much from Shea Adams. Even Torino fans, I've got close friends who are Torino fans, and then they had question marks over the entire season. They had question marks over Paulo Vanoli. And then Shea Adams comes in, sets goals up and scores them, and leads the line perfectly well, fully understanding what his coach wants immediately. And so he has contributed with his immediate impact to creating this status that Scottish players now have in Serie A.
Perhaps one of the biggest stories in Italy right now is Scott McTominay. He seems to have taken the league by absolute storm so far. Paolo Di Canio, in fact, coming out this week saying that the Manchester United directors should be arrested for giving him away to Napoli. Meanwhile, in Naples, he seems to have been heralded as this cult figure already. Did anyone see this coming from Scott McTominay?
His move did make more headline news, that must be said. Coming from Manchester United, taking the step from the Premier League to Serie A. And so it was, even when his unveiling on the pitch was something which was unique. And so the expectations were high for McTominay. But he's matched them, if not gone beyond what was expected from him. His link-up play with Lukaku is outstanding. And the big question, though, is like, Naples is a one-club city. It's not only one club city, the entire surrounding area is all focused on Napoli. It's difficult to grasp because in Glasgow, Edinburgh, we've got Dundee, we've got 2 clubs per city. Aberdeen stands alone, but then Aberdeen's not the size of Napoli. And when you kiss the badge, there was the moment when, oops, is that a bit too early to go kissing the badge? Like, was it match day 5 games into his career at Napoli? But he was trying to put across that the passion that he's received from the fans, he wants to give back. And once you've got the fans behind you, the Maradona, as it's now called, you're set, because those fans are among the most passionate in Serie A. They're unbelievable. Even like when the team coach arrives, it struggles to get into the stadium. There are so many fans there cheering them on. And so eventually the coach driver needs to lean out of the windows and ask the fans to get out the way. Otherwise, they're not going to arrive in time. It is so intense. And if McTominay can cope with that intensity, he'll be massive.
Just how big is Antonio Conte's presence been in all of this? Obviously, he's a manager who likes his players to work hard, like them to play in a certain system. We've seen before at Inter just how he's got the best out of Romelu Lukaku. Do you think McTominay is benefiting from being under the Conte leadership?
Yeah. Conte's training sessions, it's coming out as well now from some old Juventus players who've now retired, that the pre-season is so intense that they reach the point of actually physically vomiting through fatigue. Some clubs in Italy don't put their players through such an intense pre-season. In Britain, it's pretty normal, especially in the Premier League. If you can't run the Premier League, you can't make it as a player. So McTominay as well would have impressed Conte with his ability to hack the intensity of the pre-season. And he comes through that end of the pre-season and makes an impact immediately on the pitch. And he is, when you see him physically, you understand that a lot of the Italian players, it's difficult to understand when you see them on the screen, but they're not that big. McTominay is towering over these players.
You touched on there on Billy Gilmour. He also made that move along with Scott McTominay. How is he settled in? Obviously, McTominay's grabbed all the headlines, but Gilmour maybe just a little bit of a slower start to his career in Naples.
Yeah, the move, they were speaking about the move before McTominay arrived. And then it was put on hold because Matt O'Reilly first wanted to go to Atalanta, and then Celtic obviously held off because he wanted some more money. And he went to Brighton. And then when he went to Brighton, that freed Gilmour. Then Matt O'Reilly got injured. And so Brighton were like, let's hold on to Gilmour and see how it unfolds. But Conte wanted Gilmour. And now they're talking about this the double playmaker in midfield. So to have Gilmour and Lobotka playing in the same team. They did it in the Italian Cup against Palermo. Gilmour played really well. They smashed Palermo. It was a 5-0 thrashing. Yeah. 5-0 going on 6, 7 or 8. It could have been any score come the end of the game. And Gilmour was very impressive. And this is where some of the Italian pundits have been quite right in saying that because Napoli were so bad last season, I think they finished 10th. It was the worst performance from a defending champion in the history of Serie A. So they're not in any of the European competitions. And so they don't have any of the midweek matches. Gilmour would have benefited from Napoli being in the Europa League or the Conference League. Then he would have got more playing time. As it is in Serie A, just being given like a couple of minutes at the end of the game. And apart from that full match against Palermo, he's been looking on from the bench. But I repeat, Conte wants to play him and Lobotka together, apparently.
There's been a lot of hype around players such as Lennon, Miller, technical, gifted young midfielders. He's won the Premiership Player of the Month at only 18 years old. Do you think this path between Scotland and Italy is one that we'll continue to see trodden over the next couple of years?
Obviously, once clubs understand that a country can give you talented players, the scouts will be there and the scouts will continue to send back the reports. And so if there are players on the radar and they understand that is like the work ethic, will you follow what the coach wants? In Italy, they're so precise that you've got to follow what the coach tells you. And if you're willing to follow what the coach tells you and you can produce it on the pitch at the weekend, and they know that players coming from this country will do exactly what the coach wants you, then they'll continue to go for them and give them their chance. Because once they've been given a chance, they can prove their worth. You mentioned them, Liam Henderson and maybe Josh Doig are two which haven't quite proved their quality week in, week out. The point is, if these players continue to impress, then the Italian clubs will go knocking on the door again of Scottish clubs and asking, because also the prices are not that high and there's not that much money floating around the Italian game. And so if they can get a quality player who follows what the coach wants at a decent price, of course they'll come knocking.
Well, Paul, it looks like there could be a very bright relationship between Scottish players and Serie A in the future. Thank you very much for joining us today on PLZ Soccer. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to follow us on all our social media platforms.